Thank you very much, Sachin. Yasinmalik is the chairman of the Jammoo and Kashmir Liberation Front. His faction is a secular separatist movement which advocates a united Kashmir independent from both India and Pakistan. Malik came into prominence as a militant in the JKLF and underwent training in Pakistan-based camps. He later surrendered and turned to a peaceful mode of protest. The JKLF was originally a militant organization, but since 1995 it has renounced all violence and called for strictly peaceful methods to achieve its aims. Yasinmalik is also a strong advocate for the right of return of Hindu Kashmiri Pandits who have been forced to leave the state. Clearly his selection on this panel was somewhat of a controversy, as we all heard from the brouhaha at the beginning. But I think, Arun, I respect your decision to make this conclave a venue where all voices can be heard, because I think the art of democracy is one of conversation. Yasin?
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate that this gathering is aimed to bring together leaders and thought leaders alike to discuss issues that plague our region and the world, with the hope that this dialogue is meant to offer all of us a chance to open our hearts and minds. I would like to discuss the issue of resolution of the Kashmir dispute and the type of future we want to give the future generations of India, Pakistan and Kashmir. Earlier this month, I was concerned when I heard PPP co-chairman Asif Ali Zardari propose that the issue of resolving the Kashmir dispute could wait and be left for future generations to deal with. I was further distressed to see this notion welcomed in the media and within the public discourse in India, when two Prime Ministers, Mr. Vajpayee and Mr. Manmohan Singh, have given public commitments to resolve the dispute. What type of a message are you now giving to the youth of Kashmir? I see this as a recipe for disaster. For 60 years, we have already seen this problem passed on to generation after generation, and we have seen this conflict become more deadly and more costly. What has this passing of baton meant? For the 60 years, 3 generations of Kashmir have suffered this conflict and the injustice that it represents. We have seen our nation divided and disputed between India and Pakistan. Kashmiris are the people from whom everything was taken, and still our voice, our aspirations, and are yet to be heard and accepted as legitimate and fair. I cannot describe to you what it is like to be born in a conflict zone in which your future is absolutely uncertain. 3 generations of Kashmir have suffered this in different ways. We have seen our society and our social fabric transformed by the forces of heavy military occupation, state manipulation and violent conflict. For 60 years, my people have persisted in an epic of struggle and sacrifice to win our dream of independence and to achieve a peaceful and certain future. We have paid a very heavy cost. We have seen our non-violent struggle crushed by violence and its adherents tortured and locked behind the bars for decades. My own generation finally lost faith in the effectiveness of non-violent struggle and felt compelled to pick up the gun in 1988 for the same convictions our parents held. My entire generation got almost entirely wiped out. A Kashmiri funeral became one of the old burying the young. This tragic conflict gave us cruel gifts, thousands of orphans and widows, political prisoners and martyrs' graveyards. While JKLF put down the gun and returned to a non-violent struggle more than 14 years ago, settle the bloodshed, and violent state oppression continued. And in the midst of all of this, a new generation of Kashmiri children was born and raised in the boiling cauldron of violent conflict. Today's youth in Kashmir possess an even deeper sense of anger and even more intense sense of injustice than my generation felt 20 years ago. Thousands upon thousands sacrificed their lives. There are thousands of stories. Each one of them could justify a revolution. Mataye lahu kalam chin gaya to kya gam hai कि खूने दिल में डुबो ली हैं उंगलियां मैंने. The coming generation is closely watching our Gandhian-like non-violent struggle. They are watching ever so closely where our path of seeking negotiation to resolve this dispute will lead. It is heartbreaking that Kashmiri Muslims and Kashmiri Pandits youth have grown up without each other's friendship. I am deeply worried that our culture of coexistence is under permanent threat if we are unable to end our separation soon. The longer this issue gets delayed, the more complicated it will become. Yet now in 2008, we are hearing that we should pass it on to yet another generation to deal with. And what has this passing of baton of the unresolved Kashmir dispute meant for the people of India and Pakistan? For 60 years, 3 generations of India and Pakistan have had to suffer the uncertainty of 4 wars, multiple crises, and the utter waste of resources. This has meant South Asia, home to 1 out of every 5 human beings in the world, has remained divided and unable to fully seize the opportunities of free trade and the free exchange of ideas and talent. The opportunity costs in terms of eradicating ignorance, tolerance, poverty and disease, in terms of pursuing development and in terms of creating harmonious and peaceful societies has been immeasurable. Yet we are hearing statements in 2008 that we should pass on, along with the brand new nuclear arsenals, one of the world's most dangerous unresolved international conflict, to yet another generation. What future do we want to pass on to the next generation of Indians, Pakistanis and Kashmiris? Will the next generation in Kashmir see the sacrifices of Kashmiris, yield them the gift of freedom and lasting peace, or will they continue to suffer the agony and uncertainty of this dispute? What future do we want to pass on to the South Asian region and to the world at large? Do we want to keep the future generation chained to the 20th century by conflict, or do we want to solve this issue once for all, so that our future generations may together seize the open possibilities of 21st century? I must say with deep and sobering honesty, these are among the most urgent questions we must all be asking ourselves today. In the text of invitation letter from India Today conclave, my attention was drawn to the fact that India has predominantly youthful population. When I looked into this a bit deeper, I was amazed to learn that India and Pakistan have 2 of the youngest populations in the world. The various projections show that our region will be getting even younger up until 2050. Many experts see this as a great asset and talk of a demographic dividend. But I say that this is as much a challenge as an opportunity. It will all depend on whether the future generations can grow up in an atmosphere of peace and justice, one where all our energies can focus on the challenge of equipping the new generations for success. We must all think deeper about this shift towards more youthful populations and what the consequences will be if we pass on a conflict like Kashmir dispute to increasingly younger population in a region plagued by inequality, intolerance, terrorism, poverty and disease. Our region is at crossroads, and there is doubt that this is the time for courageous and visionary leadership. In my opinion, the question that we ask about the type of future we want to give our coming generations are the same critical questions that the entire globe is faced with today. I believe that if we can all exercise enough courage, enough empathy and enough imagination to find a permanent solution to the Kashmir dispute, we can surely show the world a practical way forward. So if I could change the world, what would I propose we do? First, we must ensure that the world's conflicts are effectively and sincerely resolved through serious and inclusive negotiation process and creative problem solving. This is the time to solve the Kashmir dispute once and for all through good faith negotiations based on the principles of justice. Let us gift our future generations another more positive and creative problem for them to take share and solve. One, co-creative co-creating values, co-creating knowledge societies, and ensure a prosperous South Asia. I was the first person to welcome the current peace process between India and Pakistan, but I am sorry to say that it has yet to become a serious, inclusive and public peace process. Regarding the process, three basic things are needed. First, India and Pakistan must institutionalize the peace process. Second, all the key parties in both countries must formally be taken on board. Third, most importantly, self-representation and inclusion of the people of Jammu and Kashmir must be guaranteed in any good faith negotiation meant to decide the future of our homeland. I keep hearing these new buzzwords on 21st century leadership being discussed in India public discourse, especially in forums like these: servant leadership, global leadership, innovation mindsets, open possibility thinking, encouraging enterprise and risk-taking. If we could apply the type of problem-solving spirit and forward-looking approaches these mantras embody to exercise leadership in the region, I am sure we can find a just and workable solution, one that is in accordance with the wishes of the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and one that is acceptable to India and Pakistan. Second, we must provide positive and creative alternatives to the path of violence and must ensure a global culture of non-violence and tolerance for dissent. When I went out in search of Gandhi, in the land of Gandhi, I was shocked to find the spirit of Gandhi is no more. This time, the same country whose freedom struggle gives the world the examples of ahimsa, which inspired the likes of Mandela and Martin Luther King and freedom-seeking people across the globe, has provided little space for a non-violent freedom struggle in Kashmir and has used every sort of violent means to crush it. After we declared unilateral ceasefire in 1994 and committed ourselves to Gandhian means of resistance, 600 of my colleagues have been killed. If only non-violent struggle in the 21st century was as easy as standing in front of someone's door with flowers and holding a sign reading, "Get well soon." निसार तेरी गलियों पे वतन के जहां चली है रस्म की कोई सर उठा के न चले, जो कोई चाहने वाला तेरे तवाफ को निकले, नजर चुरा के चले, जिस्म व जान बचा के चले. As far as I am concerned, it is my firm conviction that the non-violent freedom struggle we have been pursuing in Kashmir since 1994 will emerge as the force more powerful. For me, the challenge has been to find creative ways of carrying out non-violent struggle in the face of violent state oppression, a violence-fixated news media, the lack of a serious dispute resolution process, and the continuing lack of public empathy in India towards exploring solidarity with Kashmiri sacrifices. But we are trying very hard. Having a blissful childhood is a luxury in Kashmir. Very lucky few have them. I remember leaving school. I have lost count of the number of years I have spent in jail, but my mother said it is 10 years. I particularly remember being jailed in a mental asylum in Agra for a year. The torture of seeing the abundance of pain my people carry with them in this indifferent world vastly surpasses the torture of being jailed in that asylum. I would much prefer the insanity of those confined than the insanity that subjugation has inflicted on our nation. दुनिया की महफिलों से उकता गया हूँ या रब, क्या लुत्फ अंजुमन का जब दिल ही बुझ गया हो. I also remember the time spent in solitary confinement, the torment of silence and loneliness. In years of solitary confinement are the nightmares that still visit me. Death sought me and my friends constantly during our underground years. I am standing in front of you because I cheated it. Many of my friends were killed. What can I say? I gave my entire youth to a cause, so did thousands of others. The temptation to pretend that nothing has happened in Kashmir and there is nothing to be done perpetuates an injustice. The youth of Kashmir will simply not accept it. We must not pass on this type of a life to next generation. I hope reason prevails upon those who say we should. So if I could change the world, I would propose that we do not wait any longer before trying to do so. As Anne Frank once said, is not it wonderful that no one need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world? Again, I thank you very much.